Okay, so let's get started in Muse. So I'm going to do a little intro to the program and kind of show you how to get started on your own websites. There are tons of better videos than this to show you how to do this, but I figure this helps address your specific questions in the class. So when you open Muse, the first thing you hit is New, pretty obvious in comparison to all the other Adobe programs. And it's going to give you some options that you're going to need to navigate. So there's a few things here that I want you guys specifically to keep in mind. Because this is your first site, I do not suggest doing a fluid width site because it's going to freak you out when it does weird stuff. You do not have to create a responsive site for your first site. It's a lot easier to just do a fixed width site. So that's what we actually did in our first HTML websites. They were fixed width, which means they were a set size, and then when you open and close the browser, it just cropped or expanded the background. That's what we're creating. So I like this to be probably about 1200 or a little wider. There's a lot of standardized sizes. 920 is fine, but I'm going to go with 1200. I'm going to leave it as a one-column website. And then if you check your advanced settings, you can add some stuff here. For example, you can have a minimum height for your pages so that they don't become little hot dog slivers at the top of your browser. But leaving it as it is fine, and then you can leave your sticky footer as well. So if you don't see those, they're in advanced settings. Then we click OK. And now this is already much more approachable than it was when you started your code, because all of the code that's like body is, HTML is, all of that's already written. So what you instead have is you start on your sort of little map here. And what you're going to do is you're going to build your sitemap. So if you remember the very, very first class, we talked about drawing out your sitemaps for your HTML site where you kind of broke it into sections and showed what was happening. This is a little easier because all you have to do is click the plus to insert a page. And then so if this one is home, and typically you leave it titled home, you're going to maybe make this one. So let's say this is gallery. This one is about me or about. And then this one is going to be contact. And then let's say for gallery, we want two galleries. Maybe we want portrait work and we want personal work or conceptual work or something like that. So maybe for one, I put conceptual, and then I'm going to create one next to it. And this one is going to be called client work or client. So in those few seconds, I've essentially created the skeleton for my site. All of these pages are now written into the code. They have their titles and they're ready to go. Now, if you've used InDesign, you'll probably be familiar with master pages. This is basically some stylistic choices you can make and then apply to all of your pages. You can also make multiple master pages. So, for example, if you want a master page that has a completely different sort of layout for the home page, you can create an alternate right here. I'm going to exit that one, and I'm going to go to my regular master page. And you can see this is my site. So it's 1200 wide. It's trying to give me a little responsive tour here. I don't really want you to do that yet because that's a little too advanced for your first Muse ever. And you can see that our site is set to, it looks like this one's set to 1400 somehow, but there's our actual breakpoint for our site. And then if we click on that, it will bring us back there. So I'm actually going to explain these breakpoints as well. They're pretty important. What the breakpoints are they are spots if you close the browser to that size, it adjusts the layout. So this is really helpful if you're also trying to design your website to work for mobile. What you can do is find out the width you want, which I think is something like 350 or it's like something close to that. And you can just create a new breakpoint. So for example, if I come in, it looks like, if I come in here and I decide I kind of want my site to be about this wide, maybe 350, and I think I can set that to be centered. I can then drag in my little, you see how it says simulate browser width? It's showing me what the site will look like. I can then hit this plus, and it will create a new breakpoint. And now we can see it has centered itself. So what that means is as I close my browser, when it hits this width, it's going to change the website. I'm going to leave that here, and I'm going to show you how that might actually work in the real world. So you can, if you get all these weird tabs that you've made on accident, just be aware that that's what those are. So it looks like it kind of created an automatic 1400, and then I also have a breakpoint at 1200, which was the size I selected. So let's start here at our 1400 and kind of take a look at what we can do here. So it's very easy to add content in that I can literally just draw a text box and start typing, or I can create like objects and things like that. So I can sort of create boxes and do all kinds of stuff there, which is sort of basic shapes. So for example, if I wanted like my navigation to have like a gray box behind it, I could, do up this box, change the fill, and create some sort of graphic elements that way. I'm going to delete that because when you create your nav, you actually are going to want to try and create this from your widgets library. If I select that, you'll see I have some different things I can pick from. So I have buttons, I have compositions, forms, menus, panels, slideshows, and social. And you can get tons more. There's a lot of downloadable little packets that are called like widgets that you can upload and then use. For example, I actually purchased a social media widget that you could drag in, that what it allowed you to do is when you clicked on one of the social media, it automatically set up your page as a share. So like share this page. Whereas that code is actually a little hard to write and it's difficult to do with these social media links. This allowed you to actually just click and it would share that page in the correct format for that social media site. We can actually go to our menus here, and if we click, we can see a preview of a horizontal and a vertical menu. So if I drag out my horizontal menu, you'll see it has already created the buttons for the pages that I've made in Muse. So it says Home, Gallery, About, and Contact, just like it does here. And then I suspect if I click on the gallery, it will open a submenu. So let's go back, and if I click and click, it looks like there should be a submenu. Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to kind of play with that. But essentially now I can start changing some things about this. So if I go, ooh, I really don't like that gray background, I can select one of my buttons, change the background to something else, and you can see it's pretty easy to change that code. I can also stretch the width or adjust the height or change the typography in the buttons. So if I want it to be all caps or something, the hardest part I think in Muse, and I'm experiencing it now, is getting to what you're trying to get to. It's really, really hard to click where you're trying to click because if you remember what we learned, things are boxes inside boxes, and it can be really difficult to get to what you're trying to get to inside there. So it's kind of giving me a little sass. But one thing I want to show you is anytime you have a widget or an object, this little play button appears in the upper right-hand corner. And if you click that, it will give you options that you can use to change things. So you can say, horizontally, center aligned, show left icon, edit together. So if I don't want them to have the same background, I can uncheck this. And now when I select my box, I should be able to change the individual button colors. And you can see that's a little bit different. So the widgets are pretty self-explanatory in that you just have to play with them to get what you want to happen. A lot of times you can, these, they have a couple little rules to them, but remember when you're clicking that you're going inside boxes. So when I click the whole group, the button's over here and it affects everything inside of it. When I start kind of digging a little deeper to get closer to these items, you can see that I'm adjusting other stuff here. So just be aware that if you click too many times, you're going to end up touching the wrong thing inside your menu. So if I set this up here and then I go back to my website, you'll notice that all of my pages now have a menu at the top. And I can't edit it from here because it's on the master page. So it prevents me from accidentally clicking it or messing with it. If I come back to my A master, we can add more stuff. We have panels. We can add, for example, at the bottom, our social media buttons or things like that. So this is like a Facebook like. You can add that right there. And then when I go to edit it, I can change my link. I can say link URL to this. I can change the color scheme, and I can, adjust the action of it. So you can see there's some very easy stuff that you just drag and drop it in, and it acts pretty reasonably. Now, if you remember from our HTML sites, we do have a footer here, and that kind of has its own sort of life. So anything you put in the footer will interact with this in a different way. For example, if this page gets longer and longer, it's going to push the footer down versus push underneath it. So just be aware that that acts like a real footer and that acts like a real header. So they can stay where they are. You can pin them and do different things like that. So let's go back to our website. This is a great example of on this home, let's say we didn't want the menu to be at the top, we wanted something else. We can drag a new master to it and set it up differently in that master. Now, no, you do things on the pages that's going to be different. Anything that's going to be the same on all of the pages, you do on the masters. So, for example, generally your navigation, you don't want it accidentally like a pixel or two different on every page so that when you click the links, it seems to be scooting around. When you need things to stay exactly in the same spot, you put them on the master page. So background colors, background images, patterns, and things like that, you put on your master page. And you can actually, I think under like site settings, we can actually, in site properties, we can set like a background color and some stuff like that. So if we decided to change our minimum width, let's actually change the minimum width to be a little bit smaller. Let's do it at 960 like it had originally. We can also go to content and advanced. So here's where we adjust our link styles. If you remember how we had to write all the code in CSS for that, you can do that here. And you can add multiple ones, no problem, right into our site properties area. So I know you won't remember every single thing, but it's kind of sort of helpful to kind of check it out. So once we've done that, we can sort of see where we're at. So let's actually scrub through and see kind of what happens to our site. So you'll notice when we reach, it looks like I'm designing on the wrong thing. This is the problem with breakpoints. Once I hit this, you'll notice everything jumped and kind of broke apart. This is the issue with working with responsive and breakpoints in your site, is that you're going to have to adjust things on every breakpoint so that they function. So when I'm in the 1200 breakpoint, I'm going to have to scoot this over and get it centered. Now it will work fine until we get to here, in which case we go, well, shoot, that doesn't fit anymore. That's going to look terrible on mobile. What we can do is we can actually come to this breakpoint. Did I actually create a breakpoint there? There should be one. There we go. If you will let me get there, that would be nice. Seems to be acting up a little bit. But you can come to your different breakpoints. It looks like this one's just not working correctly. You can then hide items from this breakpoint and change into a whole different menu. I'm not going to do that now because I think that's a little maybe too much to get into at this moment. But I do want to show you one other thing. So there's something up here, and this is going to be new to you, and that's called pinning. And what pinning does is if you actually click on it, if you hover, it should usually tell you a little bit about each of the features. But so here we go. So pin an object so that it always displays in one location in the browser. If we pin this to be centered or to be centered to the top, what it will do, and go to preview here, is it will always stay exactly in that spot. So you can see it's going to hang out right there in the top center because it's pinned into that location. Or you'll notice that this Facebook button, it looks like it's getting cropped off in that case, but you'll notice that doesn't necessarily stay in the same spot. This one does. So this allows you, let's say if you wanted to have a menu that floated over top of everything else and you added more content and the menu would stay exactly in the top even when you scroll down, that's what this is for. So on some websites, the navigation always stays in view. Even if you scroll down, the nav stays pinned to the top. That's what this is. That's pinning. So that's something you can kind of play with. You got to play a little bit with your breakpoints. Let's see. I don't really know why this breakpoint is being sassy. Oh, there it is. Good Lord. Okay. I must have undone it before. So here we have our breakpoint. If you need to change it, just double-click it. Retyping at 350. And then this is a situation where we would want to hide this and add a different menu. So actually, let me just show it to you. So I'm going to say hide in other, or hide in this breakpoint. Now, when I'm at this size and above, that menu is going to show up. But when I reach this one, it disappears. And if you actually look in your layers, you'll see that object still exists, it's just turned off. So that's kind of a very different way this works. Now, because this is smaller, I'm actually going to want to go back to my widgets. I'm going to go back to menus, and I'm going to put a vertical menu in instead. So this will work much better on my mobile site on this size. So let's just leave that there. You'll notice a little problem. If I come out here, it's still there. So I have to come back here, and I have to say hide in other breakpoints. And now you can see that it converts as we go to different areas. So you do not have to create a responsive site in any regard for this class. One width with no breakpoints is sufficient for your first Muse site. But I do want to show you that there is flexibility and how this works. So if you had created a responsive site, objects will actually change their size as you're scrubbing. So like a text box will get narrower and narrower and push the text down. So I'm sure you've seen that most websites you're seeing now are responsive, and you've probably taken that for granted. I do not expect you to do that for this class because I think it's very hard to get it to work properly, especially when you have like 10, sometimes you end up with 4 or 5 breakpoints, and that means anytime you make a change, you have to go to every breakpoint and check that change and make sure it worked. Now the objects themselves will change no problem. So if I were to come to my main min width here, and I were to change this background color to green, it's not that I'm going to have to change that in my other breakpoints. That's fine. The issue is if I move something or I change like something's width or height or size, I have to check it in the other breakpoints to make sure it didn't like scoot somewhere crazy like this little like out here that disappeared into the nether. So let's see if I can grab him. There we go. Scoot him in. So you can see how that can become really tedious to have to go from spot to spot and grab all these objects and scoot them into the frame and make sure that they're going where they're supposed to be. But it is really, if you create like one breakpoint, a lot of times my first site, I created 3 breakpoints. I had the main web page, tablet size, and then phone size. And that's relatively feasible if you're interested in that. So that's sort of one of the key and interesting things about Muse is that responsive sites are a little bit easier, that you can create very simple page structures, and that master pages allow you to define basic content that will stay the same on all your pages.